Welcome to LE Solutions for an eazyBI tutorial series. My name is Peter, and in this tutorial we will show you how you can create the velocity variance and story size KPI reports. Velocity variance captures the variance of story points delivered in a sprint. It is calculated by the rolling 5 sprint velocity minus the current sprint velocity, divided by the rolling 5 sprint velocity. The number of rolling sprints could vary, and the recommendation is to set between 3 to 5 sprints. Let's begin. We will bring the project dimension to the Pages section. Let's also bring the sprint dimension to the Rows section. We will expand the hierarchy of the sprint dimension to show all the sprints individually. Let's now bring in the sprint committed story points to filter out the unwanted entries. You can refer to the sprint velocity chart video in the link below for step-by-step details. Let's create the velocity variance measure. Open the measure dimensions. Remove the story points committed measure. Under the user-defined section, click on Define New Calculated Measure. Name the measure velocity variance. For the formula, we will take the difference between the 5 sprint rolling average velocity and the current velocity. We will then divide by the 5 sprint rolling average velocity. First, let's enter the existing measure called running story points velocity for 5 closed sprints. Then subtract it with the sprint story points completed. Ensure that it's enclosed in parentheses. Finally, we will divide it by the running story points velocity for 5 closed sprints measure. Set the formatting to decimal percentage. Click on Create. Select the new measure. You can now see the velocity variance for each sprint. Let's now add the upper and lower boundaries for the report, which will assist the Scrum team to easily visualize whether the sprint's velocity variance falls in the proper range. We will create the upper bound measure and set it to 10%. We will set the formatting to decimal percentage. Let's create the lower bound measure and set it to -10%. We will set the formatting to decimal percentage. Now that we have all the necessary information, let's format the report to become a line report. We will then set the upper bound to display as an area instead of a line. Click on the upper bound legend. Select Type and click on Area. Repeat for the lower bound legend. Notice that they are in different colors. We will change it so that they have the same color. Click on the upper bound legend. Select Color, and we will select a light blue color. Repeat for the lower bound. Now, we can easily identify when velocity variance falls between the recommended range of plus or minus 10%. Let's change the velocity variance to display as a clean curved line instead of straight lines. Click on the velocity variance legend. Select Type and click on Spline. We will now add the data labels to the report. Click on Data Labels. Notice that for the upper bound and lower bound labels make the graph too busy. Let's remove the labels. Select the upper bound legend. Select Data Label and click on Disable. Repeat for the lower bound legend. Set the x-axis as sprint name. Set the y-axis as percentage. Save the report and name it Velocity Variance. When you analyze the report, you can see that on Sprint 2, the variance jumped up to 46%, which is common at the initial phases of the Scrum development team. We also fall out of the boundaries in Sprint 4. However, you can see that in Sprint 3 and 5 it falls in the range. And this is how you create the velocity variance KPI. Story size captures the percentage of story points completed with respect to the stories completed during the sprint. It's calculated by the story points completed divided by the number of stories completed. We will start this report where we have all current and completed sprints listed in our table. You can refer to the beginning of the video for more details. Let's create the story size measure by clicking on Define New Calculated Measure. Enter the name story size. We will enter the sprint story points completed measure. We will then divide it by the sprint issues completed measure. There is one more condition that we need to add. It's possible that the team may not complete a single story in the sprint, so we need to include a method to avoid this situation or the formula will return an invalid value. To circumvent this situation, we will add the case statement and use it with the isEmpty function. Let's type in case when. Enter the isEmpty function and enter the sprint issues completed measure in it. At the end of the parenthesis, type in then. When the measure is empty, we will return 0. We will then enter the else statement to perform the original calculation when it's not 0. Finally, add the end statement. Set the formatting to a numeric decimal. Click on Create. Bring in the story size measure. Remove the story points committed measure. Let's set the report to a bar chart. Change the orientation to vertical. Add the data labels. Set the x-axis as sprint name. Set the y-axis as story points. Save the report as story size. And this is how you create the story size KPI report. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more Jira tutorials.